Hey guys, tonight we journey across the Pacific Way out into the balmy, salt-scented breezes of 19th century Hawaii. You're not here to surf or sip from a coconut. No, tonight you're heading inland into dense forests where the birds shout greetings in voices older than English and the leaves shimmer like they're in on a secret. You're here to make clothes, but not from cotton or wool. Nope, you're gonna learn how to turn tree bark into something soft enough to wrap around your sleepy, sun-warmed body. Don't worry, you probably won't survive the whole process. Not with your modern skin that's more used to fleece jackets and air-dried yoga pants than to soaking inner bark in rivers and pounding it flat with a wooden club. But hey, that's what this story's for, to walk you through it gently while your body winds down and your brain sails across time like an outrigger canoe. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are, and where in the world are you drifting off from? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've stepped off the beaten track. Sand gives way to loamy earth, and vines pull softly at your ankles. You move through the forest like a respectful guest, your breath catching on the scent of wet bark and crushed ginger. There's no path. There doesn't need to be. You're following the old knowledge now knowledge, passed by touch, by repetition, by rhythm. Above you, the canopy thickens. The heat is gentle, damp, and insistent like the inside of a well-loved clay pot. Ferns brush your arms as you reach a clearing where a low chant once echoed. This was a sacred workspace, shaded by banana leaves, surrounded by stones, shaped by generations of use. No one's here now, but somehow you still lower your voice. Your first task? Not fashion, not sewing. It's listening to the sound of the trees. Specifically, a certain kind of tree, the walk, the one whose bark will become kapa. That's what you're here to make. Kapa bark cloth that once dressed the bodies of alii, chiefs, dancers, commoners, and warriors alike. Mainstream fact: kapa was the dominant textile of pre-contact Hawaii, made almost entirely from processed bark. It was used for everything: clothing, bedding, ceremonial wraps, and even taxes. That's right, there were times when your kapa production could serve as payment. So yes, bark had value, not as firewood, but as currency, culture, and clothing. You move slowly, eyes scanning for thin trunks with pale bark paper mulberry trees. Waka. You find one. Your fingers rest against the trunk, and it feels warm, alive. This tree's not just raw material. It's a collaborator, a partner. You don't take without asking. Here's the fringe bit. Some families believed each tree had a spirit. If you took bark from a tree without offering a chant or a gift like a splash of water or a whispered thanks, you risk damaging not the tree, but the cloth it would become. Soft cloth required a soft heart, they said. You feel the weight of that. You're not just here to strip bark. You're about to learn a language with no words, just fibers, tools, and time. You press your palm to the bark. The bark is warm beneath your touch, just slightly, like skin in the sun long after the sun's gone. This is the walk tree, the paper mulberry, and tonight it is your loom, your fiber, your future nap blanket. You run your fingers gently down the trunk, feeling for smoothness. Not too young, not too gnarled. This one is just right, flexible, yielding, and tall enough to promise a decent strip of cloth. You take a small stone blade from your woven pouches. You have a woven pouch now. Just go with it and make the first shallow incision. The blade glides in with a quiet hiss, like it too respects the process. You score the bark vertically, carefully peeling away a long strip no wider than your hand. It curls slightly as it comes off, white beneath the outer skin. This is the based inner bark. It's what you're after. Mainstream fact: the walk tree wasn't native to Hawaii. It was carried here by early Polynesian voyagers, probably in double-hulled canoes, as a canoe plant, meaning if you brought nothing else, you brought walk. That's how essential it was. They even cultivated it in walled garden plots near fresh water sources, almost like a crop. Once stripped, The bark must be kept moist. You roll your collected bast into a coil, then tuck it beneath a damp cloth. Can't let it dry out, yet it would stiffen, crack, and complain the whole time you try to beat it. You're not in a rush anyway. Kapa making is about patience and a good bit of arm strength. You collect a few more strips. Each one peels easier than the last, as if the tree has decided you're trustworthy. The sap is faintly sticky, and it smells oddly sweet. Somewhere between raw zucchini and banana peel. Not unpleasant, just honest. Quirky tidbit. Some traditions involved whispering to the tree as you peeled. Not out of superstition, but rhythm. The voice guided the hand, they said. It kept the movement fluid. Like singing while chopping vegetable sterns work into something gentler. You now sit cross-legged with your harvest, laying the bark out beside you. It's thin and ivory colored, a little translucent in the moonlight. And here's where the real alchemy begins. You gently scrape off the outer bark, brown and flaky with a curved shell or a sharp tooth blade, depending on what's at hand. The goal is to reveal the pale, fibrous layer beneath. This is the soul of Kapa. Historians still argue whether all families had the same bark prep techniques, or whether each lineage passed down its own quirk special chants, tools, soaking durations. What's agreed upon? No one rushed this. The bark needed time. You needed time. When you're finished, you lay your prepared bast beside a smooth river stone and press your palms against it once more. Not in ceremony this time, just habit. You've started to move like someone who knows what's next. Because you do. You've met the walk, you've asked nicely, you've listened. Now it's time to transform. You don't start pounding bark just yet. That comes later. First, the soaking. You rise from the forest floor and head for a nearby stream wide. Slow, the kind that has no interest in going anywhere quickly. Perfect. Your bark strips ride in your hands like ribbons. Limp but promising. When you step into the cool water, your ankles hum with the sudden change in temperature. It's not cold, exactly, just direct. Like the stream wants to know what you're doing here. You lower the strips in. They float briefly before sinking with the weight of water, becoming darker, smoother. Soaking softens the bast, but more than that, it relaxes it, prepares it for what's next. You sit on a rock and let the water swirl around your legs while you wait. Mainstream fact. Soaking time varied depending on the maker's style, climate, and even social class. Some waited just a few hours. Others let the bark rest overnight. Ali'i, chiefly Kapa, especially ceremonial pieces, often received longer soaks and more intricate treatments because nothing says prestige like deeply hydrated fibers. As you wait, you inspect your tools. You've got a beater ho-ho carved from dense, heavy wood, one side ridged, one smooth. The ridges are shallow at one end and deeper at the other, like a xylophone sculpted by hand. You also have a wooden Anvilcua broad, flat and stained from years of use. These two tools, passed down or crafted fresh, are your loom, your rhythm section, your percussion ensemble. Here's the fringe tidbit. Some Kapa makers swore their ho-ho absorbed the personality of the cloth. If you used one carved with love, the cloth turned out softer. But if the tool was angry badly made, cracked, or used in frustration, it could leave scars in the fibers. In other words, bad vibes were very visible. Back in the water, your bark is ready. You lift it out, and it hangs like wet silk. Back to the kua you go, smoothing the first piece flat. You place it carefully on the wooden surface, then raise your ho-ho. And no rhythm. The first strikes are gentle, tap, tap. Then a little firmer. You don't smash it, you coax it, you guide it into softness. Fibers begin to stretch under the repeated pressure, flattening outward. You rotate the strip slightly. Keep it centered, keep it even. You're not just making cloth, you're making music. Historians still argue whether this was considered work or ceremony. The answer might be both. Some women sang, others worked in silence, letting the beat speak. In larger hail, workhouses, dozens of ho-hoa beat in sync, creating a heartbeat for the village. Imagine lying in bed and falling asleep to the sound of Kapa being born. Tap, 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 a lullaby made of wood and will. You change to the groove side of the ho-hoa now. This part isn't for flattening, it's for stretching. The ridges catch and pull, forcing the fibers to elongate. You see the bark's transformation in real time, from stringy slivers to a pale sheet. It looks impossibly fragile, but it holds. Each strike, each pass draws the cloth thinner and wider. It will take hours to finish even one proper piece, but you're not here for a deadline. You're here to understand why a tree's inner skin became something you could wear like memory. You keep beating, the rhythm returns. Your hands ache in a good way, the way they do when you've made something real. The bark has yielded beneath your ho-ho, stretching and softening with every strike. It's thin now. Not quite translucent, but nearly. You lift it gently. It drapes over your forearms like warm snow, surprisingly flexible. You hold it up to the light and see that it shimmers faintly, like a reflection on water. It's not cloth yet, but it's getting there. Now, the cloth needs rest. You walk ides, walk Itover to the drying area, a flat stretch of lava rock that holds heat like it remembers sunlight. You spread the bark gently across the stone, patting the edges so they don't curl. The breeze here is softer, as if the wind knows not to interrupt. The air smells of iron and damp moss. You sit nearby and listen. Mainstream fact: Hawaiian kapa was often dried in the open air, laid across clean lava stone. The rock's retained warmth helped quicken the process, but the drying wasn't just mechanical, it was deeply observed. If clouds threatened rain, the bark had to be rushed indoors. If shadows crept too far over the stone, it could dry unevenly and warp. You lie back, looking up at the swaying treetops. The sun filters down like melted gold. Somewhere in the distance, a minor bird calls out like it's reading from a script. It's a sleepy, perfect moment until you remember something important. Don't leave the bark out after sundown. That's what the elders warned. Not because of rain, not because of bugs, because of visitors. Quirky tidbit: it was said that if kapa was left out overnight, night marchers' ghostly processions of ancient warriors might pass by. If they touched your cloth, it would carry their energy. Sometimes that meant misfortune. Sometimes illness. Occasionally, a little extra attitude woven in. Either way, not ideal if you're just trying to make a blanket. Historians still argue whether this belief was literal or metaphorical. Was it a spiritual precaution or a practical reminder to bring in valuable fabric before it got damp? Either way, no one risked it. You don't either. So you set a stone on the corner of the bark, just for now, and begin preparing your next piece. Another strip of bast, another rhythmic session of softening and shaping, but this time, something changes. You notice your rhythm, not just in your arms, but in your breathing, in the way your shoulders move. You're syncing up not to a clock, not to a schedule, but to the fiber itself. When it resists, you ease off. When it stretches, you follow. You're not forcing it, you're partnering. This is where things get subtle. A cloth, too thin tears, too thick and it's stiff, too damp and it rots, too dry and it flakes like old paper. You have to listen with your hands. You have to feel with more than fingers. This is muscle memory you don't even have yet, but you're borrowing it from the past. You finish your second piece, lay it beside the first, and sit back. Above you, the sky has shifted shades. The light is lower, warmer, the shadows longer. Time to bring the cloth in soon. But not just yet. Let it rest a little longer. The cloth is dry, now dry, but not stiff. You peel it gently from the lava rock, and it lifts like a sheet of soft paper. It crackles just a little, a satisfying sound like crumpling leaves in reverse. You fold the first sheet, then the second, and stack them carefully near your anvil. Now comes the part that separates beginners from makers. You're going to beat them again. Why? Because first beating was for softness. Second beating, that's for transformation. You place the cloth back on the kua and take your ho-ho in both hands. Not the rough ridged end this time now, you're using the smooth side, the one polished by years of contact. You hold your breath, line up the sheet, and begin again. Tap, tap, thump, tap. The rhythm returns, but this time it's deeper, calmer, like the cloth is breathing with you. Mainstream fact: after the initial beating, kapa makers would often layer multiple sheets together, fusing them with moisture and careful hammering to create larger, stronger fabric. These could be used for bedding, cloaks, even sails in some cases. That's right, clothes you could nap under or sail with. Not bad for tree bark. You try it layering 2 softened sheets with a whisper of water in between. The fibers cling instantly, like old friends reunited. You press gently, then more firmly, striking a pattern across the surface. The texture starts to change. Before, it was fibrous. Now it's becoming smooth, pliable, oddly silky. You feel pride warming your chest, or maybe that's just your arms aching. A voice echoes in your memory an elder from a story you half remember. She used to say, "The bark tells you when it's done. If you finish first, you did it wrong." Quirky tidbit: some kapa makers claim the cloth could talk if you listen right. Not in words, obviously, but in how it moved beneath the ho-ho. A clean strike would hum, a bad one would slap. Too hard, and the cloth would whimper. Too light, and it wouldn't answer. The perfect strike? That sounded like a deep sigh. You find that sigh now. Your ho-ho taps the cloth and the sound is just right. Not loud, not sharp, just right. It's enough to stop you mid-beat. You close your eyes for a moment and just breathe. Historians still argue whether this second beating was necessary for structural integrity or mostly aesthetic. Did it really strengthen the cloth? Or was it just tradition woven into muscle memory? Either way, the result was undeniable. The kapa became more than bark, it became cloth. You smooth the edges with a little strip of bamboo, fold the corners. The final sheet lies in your lap like a story written without ink, pale, soft, and warm from the rhythm. You reach for another sheet. Tap, tap, sigh. The wind moves through the clearing again, not loud, but present. You're not in a rush. The stars are rising slowly, and your cloth is nearly ready to be seen. The night thickens, but not with darkness, with quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a blanket soft, weighty, humming just under the surface. You finish beating your cloth, and now it rests folded and clean beside you. But kapa isn't done when it's smooth. Not in 19th century Hawaii. Now comes the part where bark becomes beauty. You move to the side of the clearing where small bowls wait. One filled with turmeric root, grated and pungent. Another with soot-black kukui ash. A third with red dye pressed from alea clay. You dip your fingers into the yellow one. It smells like earth and sunburn. This is the first color. Mainstream fact: kapa was often dyed using natural pigments sourced from native plants, earth, and even ashes. Each color carried meaning: yellow for royalty, red for sacredness, black for strength. Kapa was more than something you wore, it was how you said who you were without opening your mouth. You begin rubbing turmeric into the cloth with a carved shell, working it into the fibers until they glow with gold. It's uneven, sure, but the unevenness is part of the charm. Uniformity wasn't the goal, character was. The dyes stain your fingers like secrets you can't wash off. That's how you know it's working. Next, the black ink. You pick up a bamboo stamp. Its end carved in a pattern of repeating triangles. You press it into the kukui ash mixture, then carefully tap it against the cloth. Once, twice, again. A trail of symbols appears. Geometric, bold, a visual rhythm echoing the beat of your ho-ho. Quirky tidbit: no two kapa makers use exactly the same stamp patterns. Many carve their own using shark teeth or coral shards. Some designs were considered signatures. Others were messages-coded statements about family, love, death, or politics, like emojis, but with more scraping involved. You switch to red now, dotting the edges of the cloth in rough circles. Not perfect, just deliberate. Color is a conversation between past and present, and you're speaking softly. The moon is out, pale and nosy. You smile at it. Somewhere nearby, a soft rustle reminds you that you're not alone in this forest, though nothing's approaching. Just the night, settling in like it owns the place. Which, honestly, it does. Historians still argue whether decoration in kapa was primarily for aesthetics, for spiritual protection, or for social signaling. Some pieces were definitely ceremonial, used in rituals, births, funerals. Others were purely personal. A favorite color, a lucky symbol, a secret crush stamped subtly into the hem. Love letters in bark. You finish your design. The cloth now glows under moonlight, patterned and alive. You lift it up, and it rustles like wine through palm leaves. You press it against your face, not hard, just enough to feel the texture. It smells faintly of turmeric wood and something else, something older. You fold the cloth again. You've worked it, dyed it, spoken to it. Now you let it rest. The stars overhead begin to wheel, slow and constant. Your work is starting to look like something someone might wear, or give, or pass down. But before that, there's more to learn. The cloth lies beside you, now beaten, dyed, stamped, and still. But this isn't just a sheet of fabric. Not in this world. Now it's time to wrap it, to wear it, to become part of it. Kapa wasn't just utilitarian. It was identity, fashion, status, personality tied, draped, and folded into form. You pick up one length of kappa plain, but warm to the touch, and swing it over your shoulder like a cloak. It doesn't feel like bark. Not anymore. It clings softly, whispering against your skin like woven memory. Mainstream fact. In 19th century Hawaii, kappa was worn in countless ways depending on gender, rank, and purpose. Men often wore a malo, a loincloth wrapped between the legs and tied at the waist. Women favored the pau, a wrapped skirt, sometimes layered or scented with leaves. Chiefs, of course, had the boldest designs, and ceremonial wraps could be yards long, fragrant with sandalwood or ti leaves. You experiment now, folding the cloth over your waist, tucking it neatly. It holds. You try shoulder wrap next, letting it drape over your left arm like a badge. You feel a little regal, a little ridiculous, but mostly connected. Bark on skin. History in motion. You lift another piece. This one's scented faintly floral. Someone pressed it between mayo leaves or dried hibiscus petals. The smell is light, but it hits something in your memory. Something soft. Something human. Quirky tidbit. It wasn't uncommon to scent kappa before big gatherings, weddings, feasts, rituals. Kappa could be infused with crushed herbs or laid in smoke-filled huts until it carried the aroma of the earth itself. Some say lovers exchange scented kappa the way we swap hoodies today, only less polyester. You twirl slightly in your cloth. The breeze lifts the hem just enough to remind you, everything in this land is movement. Wind, water, even fabric made from trees. But kappa wasn't always light. Sometimes it was heavy. Sometimes it was thick and stiff, especially funeral cloths or rain wraps. Some kappa was made intentionally plain, signaling grief or humility. Other times it was flirtatiously cherise. Even bark has a nightlife. Historians still argue whether these variations were strictly symbolic or purely practical. Was thick kappa for warmth or for power? Was thin kappa sexy or just easier to fold? No one agrees. That's part of the charm. Interpretation is its own kind of tradition. You sit again, wrapping the cloth tighter now, not just wearing it, but becoming it. You imagine a woman dressing for ceremony, adjusting her pau just right. You picture a young man tightening his malo before a hula, each movement grounded in rhythm and reverence. You think of kappa draped over newborns, laid over graves, bundled as offerings. It was never just clothing. It was biography. Every piece told you something about the hands that made it, the bodies that wore it, the winds that touched it. You adjust the wrap around your shoulders, the moonlight catches the folds and paints soft shadows. You are dressed now, not just in fabric, but in story. You rise, wrapped in bark cloth that no longer feels like bark at all. It hangs naturally from your shoulders, catches the breeze at the edges, and makes a soft brushing sound as you walk. It's strange you expected it to feel heavy, but it doesn't. It feels participatory, like it wants to move with you, not just sit on you. You follow the narrow trail down toward the coastline now, where others might be gathered makers, wearers, storytellers. The ocean's hush grows louder in the distance, waves exhaling against the rocks in long rolling breaths. You imagine others wearing kapa here, not in ceremony, but just living. Cooking, walking, dancing, folding the cloth over their shoulders in ways passed down through practice, not instruction. Mainstream fact. In 19th century Hawaii, kapa was still common everyday wear, especially in rural areas. Western cloth had begun arriving by then imported wool, cotton, even silk butt for many. Kapa remained a symbol of continuity. It was more than habit. It was identity. Wearing kapa was a way of saying, we remember who we are. As you walk, you see pieces of old kapa drying on stonesome patterned, others plain. The scent of smoke and flowers drifts across the path. Someone has been making cloth nearby. A faint thudding sound, the echo of hohoa on Kwastil hums in the background. It's not loud, but persistent, like a heartbeat tucked into the land itself. You smile. It's oddly comforting, this rhythmic reminder that somewhere, someone else is shaping bark into beauty. You imagine the hands at work, tired, stained, but certain. Quirky tidbit. Some families had favorite kapa pieces they used for decades. These weren't worn constantly, they were stored, brought out for specific occasions. One old story tells of a woman who could recognize her grandmother's kapa by scent alone. Each piece had its own blend of dye, flour, and time. You reach a small clearing now, where a communal, hail open-walled, with a low-thatched roof rests near a grove of palms. Inside, a few mats, a few baskets, and a line where kapa pieces hang like flags in the breeze. One has a complex red pattern stamped along his border-stylized fish, maybe, or birds. Another is pale yellow, with subtle lines like rainfall. Historians still argue whether kapa design motifs had standardized meanings or were mostly artistic. Was a triangle always a wave? Was a circle always the sun? Some believe patterns held symbolic code. Others that they were simply expressions of beauty, perhaps both, or maybe meanings shifted like clouds. You step inside the hail and sit on a mat, still wrapped in your cloth. It's warm here. Someone has left fresh tie leaves near the entrance, and a bowl of water rests in the corner. The smell of earth and fiber lingers in the air like time has its own cologne. You lean back slightly, letting the night surround you. Outside, the ho-ho's beat grows softer, or maybe it's farther away. Either way, it stays with you. Because when you wear kapa, you don't just wear the cloth. You wear the land. You wear the rhythm. You wear the memory. The scent reaches you before the sight does, floral, smoky, and unmistakably deliberate. You follow it like a thread through the trees, and soon you arrive at another clearing, this one quieter than the others. Not silent, but reverent. You instinctively lower your voice, even though no one has spoken yet. Here, kapa isn't just cloth. It's ceremony. A woman kneels beside a long, flat board, smoothing a large sheet of kapa with steady, practiced hands. Beside her, baskets overflow with fragrant leaves mail, tea, pikake, blossom sand strips of kapa, already dyed in deep shades of ochre and gold. These aren't for everyday wear. This cloth is meant to mark a moment. Mainstream fact: kapa played a major role in significant Hawaiian ceremonies. For weddings, soft, perfumed sheets were layered over sleeping mats and worn like sashes during vows. During birthing, new mothers were wrapped in fragrant kapa believed to calm the body and spirit. And for the ali'i, Hawaiian royal taiak, piece of kapa might carry weeks of labor and meaning stitched into every line. You watch as the woman rubs male leaves between her palms, then presses the green slick fingers into the cloth. The scent seeps in, earthy and subtle. Another woman nearby uses a fine brush made of pandanus fiber to edge the cloth with deep black triangles. They're not random. The pattern echoes ocean swells a blessing for safe passage into married life. You kneel nearby, careful not to disturb. No one minds your presence. You're not exactly invisible, but you're part of the hush now. And the hush is sacred. Quirky tidbit: there were rumors, gentle ones, that certain kapa patterns could encourage fertility, or luck, or good weather. One older woman, when asked about it, just smiled and said, if the cloth is made with love, it remembers. The final sheet is lifted with care and draped over a curved bamboo frame, drying like a sunlit wave. The wind shifts, and the cloth dances slightly, as if practicing for its part in whatever comes next: a birth, a union, an ancestral welcome. You don't know exactly what ceremony this kapa is for, and it doesn't matter. The preparation is its own kind of offering. You sit back on your heels and close your eyes. The scents blend together: floral, resin, bark, thyme. Someone lights a small bit of dried alea clay at the edge of the clearing. Smoke curls upward, soft and slow. Another layer of intention. You exhale, and the cloth seems to breathe with you. This is how you mark a life, not with dates, but with layers, color, pattern, scent, memory. You rise quietly from the ceremonial clearing, letting the scent of male and smoke linger in your hair. The path dips again, tracing a bend in the land that feels familiar, like something carved not by time, but by footsteps. As you descend, the rhythm returns, not in your arms this time, but in your stride. You're not just walking anymore, you're tracing something. A few minutes later, you reach a different kind of space of work area, still open to the sky, but clearly communal. Low benches, piles of bass bark coiled neatly. A few ho-ho, their handles polished from generations of use, rest against the side of a halau. You hear quiet laughter, gentle, companionable. This is a place where people make kapa together. Mainstream fact: while some kapa making was solitary or familial, much of it, especially in pre-contact times, happened in groups. Women would gather for long work sessions, exchanging news, jokes, chants, and stories as they soaked, beat, and dried the bark. Kapa making was labor, yes, but it was also language. You approach the group with care, settling just outside the circle. One woman hums softly as she works, and without missing a beat, another harmonizes. Their hands move with practice ease, dipping bark into bowls, folding dyed sheets, applying ink stamps in rhythmic sequences. The sound is mesmerizing: cloth against wood, voices against air, memory against silence. Quirky tidbit: some families develop specific rhythms for their beating, audible codes that told others who was working that day. One pattern might mean auntie's house. Another might signal that a new sheet was being made for a birth. It was like neighborhood texting, but with percussion and bark. You find yourself swaying slightly to the beat. One of the women nods at you, then hands you a folded cloth knot, new, not flashy, but worn in the way a well-loved book might be. You unfold it and realize this piece has been patched, repaired, re-dyed. It's old, possibly older than you, but it holds. They let you touch it, not because you've earned it necessarily, but because you're here. Because making kapa, like telling stories, is meant to be shared. Historians still argue whether kapa making served as a kind of oral recordative, the patterns and scents encoded family lines, events, or even seasons. Some believe it was a tactile genealogy. Others say that's reading too much into it. But as you hold that patchwork cloth warm from someone else's hands, you're not sure it matters. You stay until the stars appear. No one announces the shift, it just happens. Work slows, voices quiet. Someone begins to fold the drying cloths for storage. You help. You help stack the folded kapa alongside a row of woven baskets, some still damp, others infused with flower scent and dry sunlight. Each piece, you realize, is slightly different. The same process, the same materials, but the results vary, like voice or fingerprint. There's something profoundly human in that. You're not just looking at fabric, you're looking at individuality in fiber. The woman beside you, the one who handed you the patchwork cloth, begins sorting through dyes. She explains not with many words, but with gentle taps on her supplies, that this batch will be used for a new kapapao, a skirt for her niece's coming-of-age ceremony. You nod. That kind of cloth matters. Mainstream fact: kapa wasn't just worn, it was gifted. It marked transitions. Babies were wrapped in soft white bark cloth. Teenagers received decorated garments during their first ceremonies. Chiefs were cloaked in layers so intricate that their cloth became political symbols. Even lovers had their own codes of cloth giving. Some kapa was made to be worn once, other pieces never at all. You watch as she blends ash with red clay, forming a deep, ruddy color that smells faintly of earth after rain. She presses her bamboo stamp into the mixture, and begins marking a fresh sheet. 1 row, 2, 3. Each print lands with soft finality, like punctuation. You help steady the fabric. That's enough. Quirky tidbit. It was considered unlucky to leave a kappa pattern unfinished overnight. If you started stamping, you needed to finish the row or risk inviting spirits to complete it in their own less helpful way. Some makers would even whisper apologies to a pattern if they had to stop midway, promising to return soon. After the 3rd row, she stops and stretches her arms. The scent of turmeric and alea clay clings to her skin. She smiles at you, not a wide grin, but the kind that acknowledges you've done something small but important, that you're not just visiting anymore, you're participating. Historians still argue whether the decorative side of kappa developed purely as cultural identity or if it served as early record keeping. Some motifs show up across islands and generations, while others seem isolated to a single family line. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, hybrid of pride and practicality. The stars are brighter now. The moon is just a sliver. Someone nearby begins a chant low, slow, rhythmic, not religious, not strict, just grounding. It loops like a lullaby in the background as the group begins packing up for the night. You feel it then, not fatigue. Exactly, but fullness. Like something you hadn't known you were missing has finally arrived and taken a seat beside you. You look down at your hands, dyed, scraped, stiff, hands that made kappa. You gather your satchel again, gently nestling a new piece of cloth beside your older one. It still smells like flowers. It still hums with work. The chant fades, the clearing empties. You begin walking again, not back the way you came, but forward into the next part of the story. The night air is warmer now, holding on to the last remnants of the sun. You follow the narrow trail lit by moonlight and starlight, your feet remembering the rhythm even when your mind doesn't try. The kappa in your satchel rests against your side with the weight of something earned, something layered in time. A soft rustling draws your attention. Ahead, a small group of figures sits gathered around a low fire. They're not making kappa, not anymore. This part of the day is for stories. You're invited with a glance. No words. You sit, someone hands you a warm stone to hold a simple thing, but it feels like a welcome. One of the elders, her kappa robe marked with faded triangles, begins to speak. Not loudly, not formally, just steadily. Mainstream fact. Storytelling was central to Hawaiian life, especially oral storytelling. Histories weren't written, they were performed, passed down not on parchment but through breath and repetition. Kappa often played a role in these stories not just as props, but as subjects. Entire chants were composed about legendary kappa makers and the cloths they crafted. The elder's tale begins with a woman who once made a sheet of kappa so fine, so soft, it made even the sea jealous. The ocean sent wind to steal it. But the woman, clever and kind, tied a stone into its hem, so when the kappa flew, it fell again, returning to her. A reminder. Things made with care don't stay lost for long. You smile. It's not a true story maybe, but it's also not false. Quirky tidbit. Some kappa sheets were given names, yes, but a few had chants written for them, not carved or drawn, but memorized. The cloth was laid out, and the chant performed so the kappa would know itself. This wasn't done for all cloth, only special ones. Birth garments, ritual wraps, bridal sheets, a whisper woven into every fold. The group continues sharing stories, some long, some just a few lines. A young boy recites one nervously. It's about a kappa cloak that made people invisible. The punchline is that it didn't work indoors. Everyone chuckles. Even the elder smiles. Historians still argue whether these stories should be treated as allegory or as coded instruction. Some academics believe each tale hides a recipe knowledge disguised as fantasy. Others insist they're just that, stories. But maybe both views miss the point. Sometimes the story itself is the inheritance. As the fire dims, people begin to rise and drift away. A few wrap themselves in kappa, the fabric catching the firelight in faded hues. You stay a moment longer, watching the embers crackle down into silence. Then you rise too, hoisting your satchel once more. The path is still there. The stars have shifted. But the sound of the stories lingers, following you like a second shadow light, warm and stitched from memory. As you step back into the night, the trail ahead is both familiar and transformed. The stories you just heard seem to echo faintly with every breeze. The kapa in your satchel, warmed by your side, feels heavier now, not in burden, but in meaning. You're no longer just a visitor to its process. You've become part of its narrative. You follow the scent of sea air, drifting toward a new sound, one you haven't yet encountered on this journey. Singing. It's not loud, just a few voices, slow and low, weaving together in harmony. The sound comes from a small structure near a grove of Thai plants open walled, like a whisper of a house. You pause outside. A woman stands beside a long table, brushing a sheet of kapa with a paste made from crushed kukui nuts. Another woman sings as she moves a delicate stamp across the cloth in a swaying rhythm, each note matching a press. Mainstream fact. The final stages of kapa making often included layering scents and finishes to protect and soften the fabric. Oils, saps, and even fermented starches were applied carefully by hand. Not all kapa was scented, but for garments used in ritual or gifted in ceremony, this finishing step was essential both functionally and spiritually. You're invited inside with a gentle gesture. No one stops singing. The work continues, and you find yourself mesmerized. The voices don't overpower the moment. Instead, they feel it like the subtle layering of dye on cloth or footpaths worn by generations. The cloth on the table shimmers slightly in the firelight. The oil deepens the red dye, gives the edges a faint gold sheen. The scent is woodsy with a faint sharpness like crushed leaf. The woman dabbing the edges dips her finger into a bowl of something dark and spicy, maybe cinnamon bark or ground awa root. She hums with the others, her voice low and steady. Quirky tidbit. In some traditions, certain chants were reserved for kapa finishing. They weren't performed elsewhere, not even at feasts or births. These songs weren't meant to be heard, they were meant to be felt, like a vibration in the cloth, or a warmth on the skin that couldn't be explained. You help where you can, holding the edge as it's brushed, folding a finished sheet once the oil has dried. No one says much, but everything has rhythm. Even the way bowls are passed and brushes are dipped seems choreographed. You wonder how many of these women learned here, watching their own mothers. You wonder what it would be like to grow up with this sound, the slow, quiet song of completion. Historians still argue whether the finishing process was more art or function. Was it to impress, to preserve, to honor, or maybe all three? What's certain is that this final step, often overlooked, was never rushed. The end was treated with as much care as the beginning. You leave the hell with your satchel slightly heavier, not from new cloth, but from understanding. You glance at the stars again, Polaris still steady, still watching. The trail continues. And now, you're not just following it. You're walking as someone who knows how to finish. The scent of kukui oil lingers on your fingers as you continue down the darkening trail, and the kapa in your satchel seems to hum with quiet memory. You're not in a hurry now. The work is done, but the learning isn't. As the trail rises gently, the air grows cooler. Crickets begin their slow rhythmic chorus, another kind of kapa beat made of wing and dusk. You crest a small hill and find yourself looking down at a familiar sight, though you've never seen it before. A wide lawn of packed earth surrounded by flickering torches, where people begin to gather. This is no work site. It's a stage. Not raised, not decorated, just cleared, leveled by many feet and many nights. Someone offers you a seat on a woven mat near the edge. You take it, careful to keep your satchel close, not because you're guarding it, because it belongs here now. Mainstream fact. In the 19th century, kapa was a key part of performance culture in Hawaii, especially in hula. Dancers wore carefully prepared kapa skirts or shoulder wraps, dyed and scented with intention. These garments weren't costumes, they were instruments. The swish of the fabric, the way it caught the firelight, even the scent it gave off, all of it became part of the story. Across the circle, a young man steps forward, barefoot and wrapped in deep crimson kapa. He bows his head slightly. Then the chant begins. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. The first beat of the IPU drum is enough to still the night. The dancer's shoulders roll, his arms unfold like waves, and the kapa moves alive again. The patterns you saw stamped earlier today now blur into motion, rhythm reignited with body. Quirky tidbit. Some hula schools believe the kapa itself could influence the performance. If it was made with care, it danced easily. If rushed, it tangled. Some kumuhula even train their students to listen to the cloth before dancing, feeling where the folds wanted to go. You feel a strange tug in your chest, watching. The kapa you helped stamp earlier, where is it now? Hanging in someone's home? Wrapped around a newborn? Or maybe waiting its turn to be worn here, in this clearing under fire and sky? Historians still argue whether kapa in performance was meant to be read or felt. Were the cloths encoded with meaning, telling parallel stories? Or were they there to hold memory, like wind traps that whisper when you move? It doesn't really matter. The feeling is what you carry. The dancer finishes. There's no applause, just silence. The kind that means something was received. You rise when the others do, your mat now warm with the heat of story. You gather your satchel, and the cloth inside shifts slightly, like it heard the drum too. The trail leads onward again, though not far. Not far at all. The firelight from the hula clearing still glows faintly behind you as you move down the path, your feet brushing loose petals and dry leaves. Ahead, the trees open into a grove that smells of salt and crushed herbs. The breeze carries something sharper, now something cooked. You follow it instinctively, because kapa making isn't always about cloth. Sometimes, it's about everything surrounding it. The grove is quiet, but not empty. A low pavilion sits to one side, woven from bamboo and pandanus leaves. Beneath it, women sit around simmering pots and bowls of mashed root and leaves. One stirs with a long stick, another fans a pile of smoldering ti leaves, and a third kneads what looks like softened bark mixed with herbs. Mainstream fact. Medicinal kapais, there was such a thing, was real. Some sheets were soaked in awa root, tea leaf, or sandalwood, to be laid over aching joints or wrapped around women in labor. These cloths were infused with healing intent, sometimes even prayers. They weren't thrown away after they were buried or burned, like messages too personal to keep. You approach quietly and sit nearby. No one looks surprised to see you. One woman holds up a small square of kapa and dips it into a wooden bowl of dark liquid. She lifts it out again slowly, steam rising, then spreads it over a hot stone to dry. The cloth curls faintly at the corners, but she smooths it with a shell. It's careful work, purposeful. Quirky tidbit. There were even kapa polta sheeted bark cloth soaked in medicinal teas and applied to the chest or limbs. Some were for healing, some for calming the spirit. The cloth held the warmth. The scent did the rest. You take in the scene. A young girl grinds something in a bowl beside you, maybe kukui, maybe olena, turmeric. She catches you watching and grins shyly, then pats a small pile of folded cloth beside her. You smile back. You recognize the texture now. Those are not ceremonial cloths. They're not decorative. They're balm, medicine, maybe memory too. Historians still argue whether medicinal kapa was more symbolic than effective. But most agree, belief was half the treatment. If someone thought the kapa could heal them, sometimes it did. You rest your hands on your knees. You breathe in the steam, the wood smoke, the leaves. You're not being taught, you're absorbing. This isn't a lesson, it's a lullaby for the body. A reminder that making something with care can be enough. One of the women offers you a piece of freshly softened kapa. You take it, not knowing what it's meant for, but holding it anyway. It's warm, slightly damp. It smells like ginger and rain. Not everything is meant to be worn. Some things are meant to stay close, to remind you. You tuck the cloth into your satchel beside the rest. And you keep walking. The trail narrows again, curling through dense ferns and towering howl trees whose roots seem to whisper with each step you take. The kappa in your satchel shifts slightly with your movement, soft, familiar now. It's no longer something you're learning, it's something you're carrying. You step into another clearing, smaller this time, and quiet in a different way. It isn't ceremonial, or communal, or even domestic. It's personal. You realize it slowly, with a hush that falls around places meant for remembering. In the center stands a low wooden platform, worn by weather and time. Folded kappa bundles sit atop it, some bright with color, others plain and time softened. At first, you think it's a storage place. Then you see the stones surrounding it, each with names etched faintly into the surface. Some names are old, some are newer. All are placed with intention. Mainstream fact: kapa was often used in burials not only to wrap the deceased, but to line graves, shield the body, or carry offerings. The cloth was sometimes burned after, or buried with the person, or passed down to serve a ceremonial purpose in the next rite. It was, quite literally, a covering for life's final transition. You kneel beside one of the stones and run your hand across the etched name. The kappa bundle beside it is small, barely bigger than a scarf, but is wrapped tightly, its ends tied in a pattern you haven't seen before, a knot like a question mark, a fold like a sigh. No one speaks in this clearing, but it doesn't feel abandoned, just remembered. Quirky tidbit: some Hawaiian families kept one piece of kapa purely for mourning passed through generations. It might be used briefly during funerals or hung outside the home for a period of grieving. These pieces were never washed, never repurposed. They held sorrow like a whisper pressed between fibers. You sit for a moment longer, the breeze soft around your shoulders. You think about how cloth, this simple thing, can hold everything: joy, birth, beauty, ceremony, and now, grief. Historians still argue whether burial kapa had prescribed meanings or whether the rituals varied family to family. Some scholars believe certain dyes or patterns were chosen to honor specific ancestors. Others suggest it was less about symbolism, more about presence. The cloth reminded people that the body was still part of the land, still held, still warmed. You rise, quietly, and adjust your satchel. There's a finality to this place, but not an end. Because just like the cloth, stories don't disappear. They wrap, they cover, they rest, and then they continue. You step back into the trees, letting the shadows wrap around you gently. Above, a bird calls once, then silence. You keep walking. You wake the next morning to bird song, soft, uncertain, like even the birds aren't entirely sure it's time yet. The sky is a pale lavender, the kind of color that doesn't stick around long. You stretch and the kapa shifts on your shoulders, stiffens slightly with cool morning air. But it's not uncomfortable. If anything, it's like the cloth has remembered how you slept and adjusted to you. You rise and shake it out gently. The patterns still hold. The scent is fainter now, but the cloth feels lived in, like it belongs to you and you to it. Mainstream fact: kapa wasn't just for ceremony or daily wear. It played a vital role in sleep, warmth, and healing. People wrapped newborns in soft kapa to protect their skin. They layered it in sleeping areas, sometimes stacking 6 or more thick sheets for chilly nights. It was also used in childbirth and funerary rites. Bark cloth began and ended life's journey. You fold the cloth carefully and pack it into your satchel, not folded sharply, just respectfully. It's been through a lot, so have you. You make your way toward the coast again, stepping quietly through dew-wet grasses. The sea has brightened with sunrise, but the waves are still calm. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then falls quiet. It feels like the world is yawning. As you walk, You begin noticing details that escaped you. Before faint fibers stuck to tree bark, where someone stripped walkie days ago, the soft black stain of dye on a fallen stone, a child's footprint beside a half-finished copper sheet drying on the rocks. Signs of life, of memory, of story. Quirky tidbit. Some copper makers name their finest cloth, not just to show off, but because those pieces were often gifted and a name made them personal. One famous copper sheet was called Noho Ali, Seat of the Chief. Another was Kaupua, Placed Flower. Giving kapa was like giving part of your voice. You pass another Inuksuk-like pile of stones, and beside it a narrow pole with a single scrap of kapa fluttering at the top. It's frayed, sun-bleached, probably placed there moons ago. But it's still there, and it's still beautiful. Historians still argue whether such markers were trail signs, memorials, or messages. Some believe they marked sacred boundaries. Others think they were left by travelers as notes. I was here. You are not alone. Maybe they were all of those things, depending on the wind, the time, the story being told. You reach the edge of the tide where waves nibble at black sand. You squat there, brush your fingers through cold water, and let the salt cling to your skin. You think about what you've learned, not just the process, but the purpose. This wasn't just a skill. It was a way of moving through the world with awareness, of knowing what time it was without a clock, of making beauty from things that were never meant to be worn, of hearing stories in the absence of voice. You rise again. One hand rests on the kapa in your satchel. The other steadies you against the wind. And once more, you begin to walk. The trail curves gently inland now, and you follow it without question. You no longer need markers. The kapa in your satchel rustles softly with each step, like it's breathing with you. And maybe it is, after all. It came from trees. It drank sunlight. It heard the same wind. You're not carrying cloth. You're carrying a conversation with nature. As the ground rises slightly, you glance back toward the coast. The sea is still visible barely, a silver thread between black rock and cloud-streaked sky. The wind is warmer now, playful even. It tugs at the edges of your cloak as if checking whether you remember who you are. You do. You pause beside a grove of walk trees, young ones, their slender trunks still too small to harvest. But one day, someone will return here, cut them cleanly, soak their bark, and begin the rhythm again. You nod at them. A quiet thank you to future cloth. Mainstream fact. Bark cloth wasn't only made in Hawaii. Variants existed across the Pacific, Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, and beyond. Each culture developed its own names, tools, dyes, patterns. But the spirit remained the same. Honor the plant, transform it, wear it with meaning. You touch the kapa through your satchel again, and a question surfaces. Not how was this made? You know that now. The question is deeper. Who made this for the first time? What was that moment like? The leap from bark to cloth, from survival to expression. It had to start somewhere. One person, long ago, had to look at a tree and think, yes, I'll wear this. Quirky tidbit. Some Hawaiian legends suggest that kapa was a gift knot, an invention. That the gods themselves taught the first humans how to beat bark, soften fiber, and blend color. One mo'olelo tells of a spirit woman who brought the knowledge from the realm of the Akua, hidden between the folds of her own kapa robe. Historians still argue whether such stories were metaphor or memory, whether they encoded knowledge, explained origin, or simply offered something comforting under the stars. But in the end, does it matter? The kapa is here. The stories came with it. You find a rock shaped like a seat near the edge of the trail. You sit down, slowly, and look out across the forest. The wind sighs through the trees. The sky has shifted again, clouds casting soft shadows over the land. Everything is changing, but everything is still here. You open the satchel and unfold the kapa once more. You lay it across your lap, tracing the patterns with one finger. Triangles, waves, a dot where the dye bled. It's not perfect, but it's yours. You made it. And in that, you joined every maker before you, every hand that struck the ho-ho, every eye that studied the sky and said, it's time. The kapa isn't just cloth. It's memory. It's witness. It's the pause between heartbeat and breath. And now, your work is done. The forest quiets around you, the copper folded once again beside your hands, your shoulders loosen, your legs sink deeper into the rock beneath you. Even the birds have hushed. You've walked far not just in distance, but in time, and the trail behind you doesn't need to be retraced. It was never about reaching a place. It was always about understanding it. The sky has dimmed now. Polaris, steady as ever, begins to assert itself among the first evening stars. It blinks softly, not with urgency, but with welcome, as if to say, you're still guided, even in rest. Your breath slows. Each inhale stretches longer, each exhale settles deeper. The wind shifts gently, laying its hand on your cheek. The copper remains in your lap warm now, from your body, from your presence, from the patience that shaped it. You close your eyes, the world doesn't go away. It simply wraps around you like cloth. Somewhere in the forest, a ho-ho strikes again. Once, twice, a lullaby in wood and fiber. Let it continue without you. You've earned your stillness. The stars keep turning. The copper waits to be worn again. And you drift